Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to 16.1 Webinar Week. And today's webinar, What's New for ASP.NET Developers, presented by Web Program Manager Mehul and DevExpress Technical Evangelist Don Wibier. In today's session, Mehul and Don reveal the new products and enhancements shipping inside our updated ASP.NET Webforms and MVC subscriptions. FYI, the session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Mehul and Don.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. As Amanda mentioned, this is what's new in version 16.1 for Webforms and MVC. And I have my colleague here with me, Don. How are you doing today, Don?
I'm good, Mehul, and I'm ready to share some really nice new features.
Awesome, and we have a lot to show. And just a quick note, everything we're showing today is applicable both to Webforms and MVC unless we mention it otherwise. All right, so let's dive in. There's a lot to show, and we've got everything from new themes, new controls, templates, as well as improvements to existing controls. So let's start right away with the vertical grid control. This is a new control we introduced that essentially provides you a new type of grid. So what is it? Why do we make it? Well, first of all, a vertical grid is essentially just a grid control. In fact, we based it on the ASP.NET GridView control because we said, hey, the grid view is great, runs in a lot of places, supports touch, etc., etc. And by doing this, we're able to get a lot of features. So why do we even make a grid? Well, it was actually one of the most requested features that a lot of our customers asked for. And what a vertical grid essentially does is it takes the concept of columns in a grid and rows in a grid and swaps them. So now you can place the column data vertically, the row data vertically and the column data horizontally. So to really understand this, let's take a look at one of the possible layouts and why you would use this. A vertical grid really makes sense when you want to make a comparison of, let's say, products or homes or something like that. So in this case, I've got a list of homes and I've aligned them vertically. So rather than saying here's the houses here and the status and the address and so forth, instead of placing those in columns, I place them in rows so that I can vertically scroll. And you can see I've got a fixed column here on the left. So as I scroll through, I can easily say, oh, I can compare these two values or these two values. And so vertical grid allows you to easily do that. Now, because this is based on the ASP.NET GridView control, we've got some great features in there like filtering, binding to large data sources, batch editing, paging and scrolling, but we've added some new features like expandable categories. And so expandable categories allows you to create a row that essentially says the items within, the rows within under it are collapsible. So now if I don't want to look at those two rows related to information, I can collapse those. And same thing for the features. So it's a really nice feature. And the other item that is not necessarily new, but it adds a nice touch is the fixed rows. So say, for example, here, I've got these headphones, and I want to compare all their properties. And yes, I can collapse and expand the rows, but here, what I want to do instead is I want to go down, scroll down, and as I do, I've got the top row fixed, so I can see easily, oh, this is wireless or it isn't, and this one has certain features that this one doesn't. So you can see it's a really nice row item. Now you can also, if you don't want to do it for the whole page, you can also enable vertical scrolling and the fixed row will still work the same. All right, very nice feature. Next, we've upgraded some items in the ASP.NET GridView control. The key to this one is the data cell bands. Now, those of you familiar with the GridView are going to say, wait a minute, I thought you already had cell band support. Well, we had header band support, but not cell band. So the difference was you were able to create bands. Now, what are bands? Bands essentially allow you to organize grid columns into logical groups, which means that there are some columns that are related to each other. So for example, these are all features of a particular address. So I want to be able to show that and say, hey, these are the features that belong here. And these bands allow me to quickly visualize what features belong, what columns belong to which band. And so we allowed you to do this, but there was something lacking there, and that was the capability to expand that and have the same alignment within the columns. And now I'm happy to say we've closed that gap, and now it's available for the data cell bands exactly as it is for the header bands. And what's even better is when you export this, it's going to look exactly the same way. So when you pull it out to PDF or something, it's going to keep that same grid alignment that you've got in the header bands as well. Okay, next we've also improved the capability in the grid rows with something called cell merging. Now I kind of really like this feature. It's a visual feature and it depends on your end users, but essentially what it does is we take adjacent cells that have the same value. So for example, these top 3 rows are all based out of Argentina. So rather than have 3 rows that say Argentina and Buenos Aires, we combine them into one cell and center the text and say Argentina. So now visually I can tell that these three people are all based out of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and 2 of them are sales agent. So visually it can help your end users to quickly spot items that are similar. Now it's only for adjacent cells, so it depends on which it's sorted by. So for example, here I've sorted by country and position. And we do not enable this feature by default because we do not want to, surprise your end users and one day they come in and they're looking at their grid view and they're going, what happened, right? So instead, this is something you want to enable if you think it's something that they would like. Just go to Settings, Behavior, and set the Allow Cell Merge to True. But I dig that feature. It's anytime I think you can help visually, organize the information, it's a lot better. And next up, we've also improved a little feature when you are using the focus cell click in batch editing, and that is we provided this focused row. So when I click on it, it lets me know. Now this is useful because here I actually haven't started editing. When I click enter and start editing, I get even more of a focus. But previously we didn't have this focus. You didn't actually know where you were. So if you were using the keyboard to move around and then hit enter or escape, you didn't have that cue. Now, if that's a little bit hard to see, you can see it by changing it on. So let's take a look at Moderno, for example. And you can see each one will have its own version of the focus row, the focus cell highlight. All right. Next up is a feature we improved for the grid view. And Don tells me it's awesome. And Don, what have we done with the accessibility story for the ASP.NET Grid View Control?
Well, what we've done there is, thanks to a couple of clients who are having some issues with it, we have taken a good look at the grid, how it works, etc. And we are happy to announce that the grid is now compliant with the WCAG version 2 standard. And that is an accessibility guide. It stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And that tells exactly what we should do to make the grid usable if people with, for instance, a visible disability are using a screen reader like NVDA or JAWS. The grid will behave according to those guidelines.
All right, so what you're telling me is in this release we had support for Section 508, which is a very popular one, but I think it's more regionally US-based or something like that. But worldwide, this WCAG is pretty popular, and so we've worked with some customers, and I guess they really highlight it, right? And I believe Paul and Julian really work closely with these customers and with our ASP.NET team. And now you're saying that because we provide the support with this compliance, that if they use a screen reader, that they're able to get support out of those screen readers. So, for example, as they tab through these elements, they'll get those read out to them and so forth. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that is not the only thing that we did, because also in Windows there is this feature which is called the high contrast Windows mode. Mm-hmm. And that is also something for people with a disability. And this is a kind of a theme or a skin where Microsoft has removed like all things like shades on icons, all animations, and it's like really high contrast. So not too much colors and stuff. And the cool thing is that if you are using our control, our GridView control, and you use the default DevExpress theme, it will look exactly like what you're seeing on the screen right now. So we support the high contrast Windows mode as well.
All right, so you're saying that if I've got that mode set on and using the default theme from DevExpress, it complies. So, for example, certain icons are more visible and so forth. And I guess this makes sense for the default theme only, since the other themes have a lot of fonts and gradients, which wouldn't make sense in a high contrast theme, for example, like this for Windows 10. Well,
yeah.
That's awesome. All right, that looks like some real good work. And if you need this accessibility features, WebXS WCAG 2.0 level AA is really an important feature. All right, next up we've got the spreadsheet improvement, and we've done really two major things, and that's user experience improvements and performance improvements. So let me actually start with the second item here, and in the performance improvements, we have improved two major areas that we think are important for the end user, and that is when the document is loaded and when the cell is updated. So here you can see that generally for most of the major browsers, everything from Chrome to IE10, and Edge is still pretty new. You can see on Edge it wasn't as good as some of the other browsers, but we feel that Edge is still being improved. They may not even have put in their final performance items and symbols in there yet, so it remains to be seen. But generally for the major browsers like Chrome and Firefox, we have improved from version 15.2 to 16.1. So generally, just by upgrading to 16.1, your end users are going to get a performance boost. And what we did was we did some really interesting improvements. So say, for example, you are in here, and let's go full screen here, and I want to, one of them we said loading the document is also pretty quick, but also just generally using it. So if I come in here and I type in some values, and you can see as I'm typing, it's keeping up with me as fast as I'm typing. And that's a really nice experience for a web-based spreadsheet control. And it's amazing, it's fast, and I love it. And so, for example, if I come in here and just type in some values again, you can see it keeps up with me every time. Now, these performance is built in, and I recommend you try it today. Now, next up, we've done some improvements for the user experience side of things, and we added some features that are going to be familiar to your end users. Why? Because they're very much based on something that they would find in Microsoft Excel. So say, for example, I've got a formula here, right? So let's say I say, this cell times this one, and I hit enter, and I get the value. But now I want to do the same thing for these two cells. So I want to take this formula, but I want to make it relative to these two cells. Now, as you know, in Excel, you can basically select it and drag it. And so now we've done the same thing. And so this feature is called this little fill handle. So if you put a cursor on the bottom right, you get the little crosshair. And if you select it and start pulling it down, you'll see that it's got the same formula except for the row that it's on. So for example, this row is using the formula for the 52 row and so forth. Now, that's a very slick feature. But we've gone further and kind of improved it. So I believe this is probably possible in Excel as well. But let's say I've got it to months, and I don't want to, I'm kind of lazy, so I said, for the columns, I don't want to actually type it out. So if I start dragging it across, you'll see it gives me the months as well. And
that is pretty cool. But I was just going to ask, is this going to work with like weekdays or something?
Absolutely, Don. I'm a lazy developer, so this is like one of my favorite features, right? And I use this quite a bit in Excel whenever possible, right? So this is something that if your end users are using it today, they're going to completely enjoy. The fill handle makes a lot of things interesting and possible. All right. Next up, we've got another Excel-like feature for the spreadsheet, and that's the capability to copy a range and mark it with a dotted line. So what does this look like? So let's say I come in here and I want to copy these rows. Now, when I hit Control-C, you can see I've got a dotted line that tells me, oh, that's what you've got in your clipboard. So when I come in here and paste it, it tells me, hey, I can paste it again, if you want to, but that's still in the clipboard. Or if I want, I can just hit escape and says, oh, it's out of the clipboard now. So it's a very Excel-like feature that your end users are familiar with, will know how to use right away. And finally, we've got a couple other features that makes it also really nice, is that let's say I don't want to take a look at the grid lines. Well, we already gave you that capability before, where you can simply get rid of the grid lines. But now, if you're just going to read this Excel file and the spreadsheet as a report, then you can simply get rid of the headings as well. So now I don't need to look at the headings or the grid lines because I'm just looking at the numbers and the charts here. So it's possible now that you can essentially remove these headings as well as the grid lines. And finally, we've added a feature that makes it easier for printing. So if you go to the page layout and click print, under header footer, we gave you the capability to specify some items for the header and footer, for example, the page number. But now we're giving you a new custom dialog. If you click on custom header footer, that lets you define the top left, middle, and right. Same thing with the bottom left, middle, and right. So here I can come in and add, for example, the page number, or let's say the number of pages in the center area, and so forth. So now when I click OK, and let's just do a quick print here. So now when I click print, you can see that I can define all those areas in the top, middle, left, and so forth. Very nice feature that gives you granular control over defining what that looks like. Okay, next up, we've got the scheduler control. Now, in this release, we're not talking about much about the scheduler control, but I will tell you that there's some key improvements that we've done, particularly with client-side rendering, that will make your end users quite happy. And this is the capability with, first of all, if you just experience it on the client side, here I'm dragging an appointment. You can just feel that this is happening on the client side. It's fast, it's keeping up with me. And by the way, I apologize if it's too fast over the webinar, but essentially when you try the demo, and by the way, all of these demos, these are, you can see my localhost demos, I'm actually just using the beta 2 version of 16.1 that is available to existing enterprise customers. So definitely download beta 2 of 16.1 from your download products. And so you can experience this today as well. So I'm just moving this around. Now, another key improvement that we did is not just with the client-side rendering, but also with the new appointment dialog. So we've done some things with rendering and caching of this dialog, so the very first time it comes up, you can spot that maybe it took about a second. But on subsequent request, it's instant. It comes up real quick. And so these are the kind of things we're thinking about. And on this webinar, I'm only going to tell you about the items that we've done so far, but we have a lot more in the works. And I believe in the next release, you'll be very delighted to hear about a lot of things that we're working on for the scheduler control. All right, next up, we've got a couple of new themes, and these are mobile-friendly themes. Now, Don, are you an Apple guy or are you an Android guy?
I'll have to go for Android, man.
Android, fair enough, fair enough. You were a Windows phone fan, weren't you?
Well, let's put it in another way. I am a non-iOS guy.
Fair enough, fair enough. And I am an iOS guy, but I'm with you. You know, both of these new themes are fantastic. So essentially, we introduced two new themes. They are mobile-friendly themes. So why is that? Well, as you know, DevExpress controls support touch, and they also have a lot of adaptable features. As you know, in the past, we've talked about the GridView's adaptability features and so forth. Well, in this release, we've added a couple of themes. Google has a theme that is called the Material Design theme, and Apple has the iOS theme. Now, it's not particularly iOS, it's iOS-like, and that's because there are elements that exist on the web that don't exist on a mobile phone. So that's why we say iOS-like.
But Mehul, didn't we used to have a iOS theme already?
Yes, Don, and that you bring up a fair point, and that is that we used to actually have an existing iOS theme. And in this release, this is kind of a breaking change in that this new theme, iOS theme, replaces the old one. And at first you might say, well, wait a minute, why are you just going to replace an older theme with a newer version? And that's because the older one was really based on things like iOS 4, and it was old, it was outdated. And this one is updated and based on the newer one. Excuse me. And this one, we believe, is a lot better. So as you can see, it's got the blue of the iOS 9 It's got some really nice look to it. The buttons all look fantastic and so forth. Now, if you want the old iOS theme, just contact our support. We'll provide it to you. But we feel this is definitely more up to date, and it uses some of our newer styling. So if you want to take this theme in Theme Builder and say, I like this theme, but I don't like the blue. I want to make it green. I want to make it yellow. You can do that. It's a really modern theme that is nice. Now, the other theme that we introduced is Material. Now, Material, I'm going to go with Don on this, in that the Material theme has some interesting things to it as well. Just like the iOS theme, it's also got some bigger touch targets. So they're both mobile-friendly themes, so they both have bigger paddings around them, bigger touch targets, because they're meant for people to use them on a mobile, let's say iPad or something, so they may touch it with their finger. Well, in this theme, you can see when I move my mouse over it, I get a shading under it, a little drop shadow. And when I click it, I've got a little ripple effect, if you can see that. Now, if you can't, I would...
That is awesome. That is really smooth.
It is really interesting, and I think it's something your end users might enjoy. And if we take a look at it, for example, even the checkboxes are going to look kind of interesting. So let's say, for example, I've got the iOS. You've got some bigger checkboxes with the iOS than you do with Material. And I would recommend that you really compare both themes on your own and see which one you like. You can use them for the desktop. Just know that they're going to take up more space. So for example, here we've got the Material theme. If I bring up the new appointment dialog, you can see the editors have bigger sizes to them. So let's say, for example, if we switch back over to the iOS and then I bring up the new appointment dialog, you can see this one has slightly bigger paddings than the Material. So both themes for me are fantastic, and I recommend that you try them out. Now, and they're both customizable using our theme builder. One of the things, internally, I'll tell you, internally we had a debate as to what the default color is for Material theme, and Google actually doesn't define a default color. They only define a set of colors. So they say you can start with a teal, you can start with a lime green, red, but they have an accent color, and so forth. So it's really quite interesting. If you want, I can send you a link, tweet me, and I'll share that link with you. There's an interesting video they have as well. But in general, what's great is you can use our theme builder and apply any of those color schemes that you like. Okay, next up, Don, what do we got going on for the rich editor control?
Well, we've quite a bit of improvements there, and we already did quite a bit of work in the previous release, but now we have done some really useful add-ons again. So let's start with spell checking. We didn't have support for spell checking inside the rich edit control, but now we have actually included it in the Office kind of way, basically. So what you see here is like the red curly line underneath words that are probably incorrect, and this is just a matter of right-clicking one of those words and replace it with one of the found alternatives, basically.
Wow, Don, so wait a minute. This thing is going to fix my errors, so now my blog post will actually not have any typos in it?
Yeah, if you have installed the correct dictionary, it will.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you telling me that this is actually using our spell editor control? Because you can define custom dictionaries in our ASP.NET spell checker control.
Yeah, absolutely. We like to reuse our stuff. So we have also reused the spell checker control and embedded it basically inside the rich editor, which means that you can use the OpenOffice dictionaries with the rich edit control.
Very cool. Very cool.
And we do not only check like for words, we do a bit more. For instance, if you check out this line, there is a red curly line underneath the second he. So if I right click that one, it'll determine you probably want to delete the repeated word as well. So I think that's a nice nice feature as well in it.
So spell checking, grammar checking, that is very cool.
Yeah. And another thing that we have implemented is something that you might be familiar with because we have included it in the previous release of the HTML editor, and that is the find and replace feature. And this is something that I like a lot because it doesn't take up too much space in the beginning, and you can just continue with your word processing whatsoever. So what you see here is a little tiny box where you can enter a search phrase. So for instance, I'll look for world. And what you see is all instances of this found text are already highlighted throughout the entire document. And you can actually see on the right side that it has the number of items that have been found displayed already. So that's really a quick way of seeing how much times that word occurs in your document.
Oh, so wait a minute. I know the Rich Editor does some interesting things with rendering. So for example, if you've got a large document, it's only going to render that item that is necessarily visually displayed, but the find and replace will actually search the entire document and find all instances?
Yeah, exactly. We've done some very clever things there to make it possible to still search the entire document without downloading the entire document to the client.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, and once you have this this text found and you decide you want to replace it, you can just hit the little button here, and this is something really nicely done. If I click it, it will expand in like a full-blown find and replace dialog. And what you'll see here, let me drag it a bit to the side, you will actually see all the found results in the context that they were found. So you'll see a bit of the sentence where this word occurs. And I can actually navigate throughout the document to see which one I want to replace. Because maybe I only want to replace one. So I can just navigate through the document, and if I just want to replace this one, I can make it like replace only one, and it will be replaced. And you'll also see that this item will disappear from the results box. And well, once you want to replace all of it, I can just hit replace all, obviously. So yeah, I think this is a very nice find and replace feature for the rich edit control. So another thing that we have implemented is, well, we implemented like the basic behavior already in the previous release, and that has something to do with this ribbon control that you see on top of the rich editor. Let me first show you the previous version where we introduced a new element inside the ribbon control, which is called a gallery item. And this gallery item in this case shows us, and this is the previous release of DevExpress, so this is 15.2. You'll have a drop down which is resizable, which will show us all the styles that are defined inside this document. And I could now select some text and change it by clicking on this item. But there's like one little drawback here. You don't actually see what this style is looking once I select it. So what we have done with the rich editor is we have improved the gallery item displaying all the styles, and what you see now is that we have a little preview of how these styles are going to look inside the document.
Oh, that's great. That looks just like I'd expected to from Microsoft Word.
Yeah, exactly. That was already in there. And we were halfway basically, but we now finished it off. So I can now change it to the style that I selected. So just a nice little UI feature there. Another thing that we have done is specifically for developers. We have included a new feature which is called an API for the rich edit control. And You know what it means, Mehul?
Application programming interface. But what is it for?
Yeah, well, it is exactly what it stands for. You are now able by JavaScript to manipulate your document. So you can execute JavaScript methods on the rich edit control to create a document or do certain repetitive tasks that you don't want your end user to do, basically. And the best way of showing it is by showing this demo. So I'm going to scroll a bit down so you can see the document, and you can see a little box here with all the commands which are being executed. And I will now reload this page and watch the document as well as that lower pane which logs the commands being executed. And what you'll see is that we are inserting some text, we are formatting some text, we are aligning it, we are even manipulating the header, and we do a whole bunch of more things. And this is all being done by those JavaScript methods being executed in that lower log pane, basically.
So you're telling me all of this is happening on the client side?
Yeah, I didn't type anything here. I didn't click anything. I was just executing some JavaScript, and this whole document was being created.
Well, that's awesome. Why do we enable a client-side API this extensive for the rich edit?
Well, there are a couple of real-world scenarios where people want to do repetitive tasks, like maybe you want to have some sort of a macro engine or something which inserts a bunch of stuff inside the document, and that can be automated with this feature.
Okay, awesome. Now, Don, you got something else on your slide there, something about Azure Web Forms. What is that about?
Yeah, we have shown it on the Spreadsheet Control slide as well, and what we basically have done is we were having some issues with the Spreadsheet Control as well as the rich editor control if you are running these controls on a multi-instance environment on Azure. So that means that if you have like a high-load website and you want to use several web server instances on your Azure, then there were some problems synchronizing the document changes from one web server to another and back. And that is something that is fixed with 16.1.
Wait a minute. So are you saying that if I ran rich edit on Azure, there were some issues?
Well, in most scenarios, you will set up a website on a single instance website in Azure, and that would always just work fine. But for the occasions that you would have like a multi-web server instance, that didn't work on the previous releases, but that we have fixed with 16.1.
Oh, I see. So you're saying only when you have a web farm, which consists of multiple servers for trying to do load balancing or something, there were some oddities. So I think what we'll need to do is we're working on some videos, and we'll upgrade our documentation to tell you exactly how to get around this issue. But it's particular to web forms on Azure, not Azure itself, where everything works great on Azure, right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
So we have also implemented a feature that you're probably familiar with already on the ribbon control, and that means that it is also available on the ribbon control inside the rich text control as well as the spreadsheet control, which is keyboard support. And again, I'll show you a little demo on how this works.
So Don, why is keyboard support and the ribbon important?
Well, suppose you have like a, you are like a word processor basically, so you're working with a rich editor and you do lots of document typing, etc. It is a bit annoying basically to move your hand away from the keyboard to the mouse and go to the ribbon control to execute one of those actions there. So what we have done is it will be better if you could just stick your hands to the keyboard and there wouldn't be a need to move your hand from the keyboard to the mouse and back and stuff. So it's just a way of working faster with it. And the way that we have done that is basically by hitting the let me show you this little demo here. It will just show the little tooltips on top of the ribbon, so you can access the tabs as well as the actions. So it's just a little nice feature to make it work a bit better.
And so because the ribbon's also part of the rich editor and the spreadsheet and it's such a useful navigational tool, that those keyboard ninjas, they will really appreciate the capability that's also available from the desktop versions.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome.
So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the already overcomplete chart control. We have done a couple of new things in there as well. And one of the things that we introduced on the previous release were like the radar view and the polar view. We have taken that a step further, and again I'm going to show it in a demo because that makes the most sense. We have now a number of series which we call like a stacked step area, and the way that it looks is you have like the bars here inside the chart, but you can divide those bars in like specific values. And we have done the same for the full stacked step area as well. So that means that if you always have a value of 1 in this case, but only the amount of negative, neutral and positive comments in this case will vary, you'll have like a fully filled chart with all the values in there. And as I mentioned, the radar view and the polar view also support these areas now. So that means that if I check out the radar range area, you can also define like multiple values on one of those points, which will result in charts like these. And the polar range area has the same now. So just a nice add-on on this on the charting control. And we have also done something in the Visual Studio experience of DevExpress, and yeah, these are a couple of features that I like a lot. And the first one is we have now a responsive bootstrapped web application.
Wait a minute, Don. Is this Bootstrap like from getbootstrap.com, that popular layout framework?
Exactly. This is the Twitter Bootstrap web application template.
Okay, so explain to me what's going on, what it looks like.
I will. Well, we already had like a responsive project template, so I'll switch over to Visual Studio to show it to you quickly. And what we have here is if I go to a new project and I go to the 16.1 template gallery, we already had this responsive web application. And what we did with the responsive web application that we already had was that we were using the DevExpress controls with all the adaptive and responsive features in it to make this site responsive. But now we have the Bootstrap web application, and what that means is that we will use the Bootstrap CSS framework for the positioning and the responsive features like hiding and showing different areas of the site depending on the screen. And we are actually creating a really nice demo site which includes a number of DevExpress controls inside a bootstrapped web page basically.
Okay, so what you're saying is that our responsive web application template essentially used all DevExpress controls and generally used like divs and tables and so forth to layout. But Bootstrap, its strength is that it provides that capability using their CSS and so forth, and then they are responsive and adaptive. And so with this template, it's got DevExpress controls embedded in there to help customers understand how to use DevExpress controls within Bootstrap.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Can we see what it looks like?
Yeah, but before I'm going to finish off this wizard, I do want to point out this second slide, the second bullet on the slide, because I'm going to take that with me in the same project creation. And that is something which is also introduced by Microsoft in Visual Studio, one of the more recent versions, and that is support for ASP.NET Identity System.
Wait, is that this thing that we did a webinar on, Don, where we talked about authorization and security and so forth?
Exactly. And what it is basically like the next generation of authentication / authorization system as a result of the membership API that Microsoft introduced with .NET 2.
Okay, so is that better than the old membership stuff?
Well, I mean, the old membership stuff is secure and it will work fine, but I mean, the web has changed a lot, and you now have sites where you can log in onto a website through your Facebook account or your Twitter account or any other social media kind of channel. So that is a bit difficult with the membership API. I mean, it's doable, but it's not really the coolest way of doing it. And what they did with the identity system is that they have built it up from the ground. It's very modular. And it supports multi-factor authentication. It includes third-party authentication, so it is more flexible and it suits more in the current environment of web development, basically.
I got you. So what you're saying is if you need support for Active Directory or social sites like Twitter, Facebook, ASP.NET Identity is really good with that, and two-factor authentication, all that. And if you just want plain old local database, username, password, the old membership should work just fine.
Yeah, sure. So the way that you can put that on is fairly simple. Here I have the project wizard that I just kicked off with the Bootstrap application. There is this authentication model here, and we already had it in there. And what we did is we included a new item, which is the ASP.NET Identity. And once you select it, you will notice at the end that the project will have a slightly different structure which complies pretty much to the project template which comes with Visual Studio 2015, which configures like the whole identity stuff and all the bits and pieces. And well, this is the result, and if I just show you to get back to the bootstrapped project template, I'll just show you a quick peek at the code here. I'll increase the size of the font slightly. What you see here is we include Bootstrap CSS, and for people who are already familiar with Bootstrap, you'll notice like this structure is basically according to the Bootstrap layout. So this is a fully bootstrapped site. Here you've got like the conditional elements for which in this case are being hidden on certain screen sizes, etc. So this is all pure Bootstrap, and this is the new project template that we have introduced here.
All right, that's great. Can we see what it looks like?
Absolutely. Let me run the application. It will actually give you a really nice little kind of blogging demo site, which includes a couple of nice things. And once the project will start up, I'll resize it and you'll see what happens. So here it is. and here we are. So, and what happens if I resize it, so I'm going to make it smaller, you'll see that things are being resized, things are falling off, and this is all thanks to Bootstrap. And for people who are already familiar with Bootstrap, this is the obvious navigation system which comes with Bootstrap. So this is all embedded in the site right now.
All right, that's great, Don. We'll probably have another video in the future where we'll dive deeper into all that good stuff. But very cool.
Yeah. So yeah, very nice add-on on the Visual Studio experience. And we've got more. And Mehul, I think you're gonna talk some really cool stuff about this.
Yes. All right. So let me grab the screen again. And we should talk a little bit about some of the things happening. And there's some questions related to this, so maybe this will help answer them, and we'll address them at the end as well. But one of the things we announced, in fact just announced yesterday, was a new set of ASP.NET controls, widgets, whatever you want to call them, extensions. Everything's pretty much control these days. But anyways, we introduced a new set of controls for ASP.NET MVC. And these are currently in CTP, and the idea there was basically we took our existing DevExtreme widgets, the client-side JavaScript widgets that you find at js.devexpress.com, and we took those and we placed them inside and wrapped them as server-side ASP.NET MVC extensions. Now, why do we do this? And when we already have an existing MVC controls library, well, to learn more about this and to figure out what it's good for, like Razor, syntax, C#, and project template, and why, and all that good stuff, and comparison to existing, there is a webinar. And so sign up for the webinar. Come join it. That's really, all of these questions require a whole separate webinar, but definitely sign up for it. It's in a couple of weeks, and in it, I'll address all your questions. Now, there's some other questions about, for example, Don just mentioned about Bootstrap. Well, we're doing a lot of things at DevExpress for the web in this release. Some things are just starting off, like the CTP for the wrappers. I've also announced recently that we're working on a new set of Bootstrap controls. Now, this is different than the Bootstrap that Don just mentioned. So the Bootstrap file template is simply just a project template that helps you with existing ASP.NET controls. But the key issue with Bootstrap is Bootstrap comes with its own ecosystem of themes and so forth. So this announcement will simply says, hey, if you're interested in a new set of controls that we're working on, and you'd like to sign up for a beta in the future, there's a link that says register now. But in essence, we'll probably just release like a grid and the pager and so forth. But in it, our current ASP.NET controls have their own themes. And rather than create new themes to break the existing stuff, we said we'll work on a new set of stuff, and we don't know where it's going to lead. We don't know how interested people will be in it. So that's why I said we're just going to see what it brings and how much it matters for you. Now, that said, we are also working, and somebody has asked, on ASP.NET Core items. So if you haven't seen, we have announced tag helpers for ASP.NET Core that you can find at my blog. If you just go to, and I'll put a link to it as well, but tag helpers, yes. So these are available for the current release of Core RC2. They haven't released final yet, but we are keeping up with them. Now, somebody is asking, particularly about this, that. Trust me, I will have a whole webinar on this stuff when they release Core. The thing is, between RC2 and final, who knows what will change, and things could change. So for now, if you're willing, download our NuGet packages with the ASP.NET Core library and play with the tag helpers. And these tag helpers are based on also our DevExtreme widgets. All right, with that, I'll stop, because what I really want you to focus on is go download Beta 2 of 16.1. It's close to release. People are asking when. As Julian will tell you, it's very close. And the best thing is you can play with everything that we announced today. And we announced a lot. We announced all that Bootstrap stuff, upgrades to existing controls, new themes, new vertical grid control. Try all that stuff. And, you can learn more about this stuff. Of course, this webinar will be posted live. But if you go to devexpress.com/new, you'll find the what's new for all of the platforms. And so if you click on ASP, you'll see similar items, links to blog posts, all the good stuff. All right, with that, I'll hand it back to Amanda. And Amanda, I just want to say thank you to everyone. You can find me on Twitter at Mehul and Don at Don Wibier, and here's our emails as well. Do we have any questions, Amanda, we can help answer?
No, it looks like the team took care of everything that popped up, and then you answered, I think, some of the remaining ones that were in there. So
I will answer a couple of things. Yes, you're right. The team has done a great job. if by chance you ever want to refer back to one of these webinars, and if you just go to devexpress.com/webinars, not only are these future webinars that are coming up, and you should definitely, oh, speaking of which, there's a particular ASP.NET thing that we didn't mention in here, and that's because it really belongs in a separate webinar, and that's we have a new Webforms and MVC dashboard designer, which Julian and Paul will talk about tomorrow. So in April, we announced the CTP, and the dashboard designer is awesome, and they'll talk more about all this stuff tomorrow. So sign up for the webinar tomorrow. And then the day after, sorry, as Amanda will tell you, we'll be doing this stuff. But anyways, what I really want to talk about on this webinars page is at the bottom is all the previously recorded webinars. So if you wanted to see, for example, you know, what happened yesterday in the Windows webinar, you can click on that. The YouTube videos right here, and any links particularly for this video are available through the, I think, the YouTube channel as well. Oops, sorry about that. But anyways, that's all I wanted to mention. And if you have questions for us, email us, contact us, or particular tech questions and issues that come up, please let our support team know.
Awesome. Thank you, Mehul. All right, everybody, you can check out devexpress.com/webinars for all the upcoming 16.1 webinars. Tomorrow is What's New in Reporting and Dashboards, presented by DevExpress CTO Julian Bucknell and Technical Evangelist Paul Usher. And then Thursday, we have Mehul and Don back with What's New in DevExtreme, HTML5, and mobile. And like we mentioned previously, today's webinar will also be available on our DevExpress YouTube channel. The link will be posted in the chat box. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Mehul and Don, and thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.